How's everybody doing? Real Abilities Film Festival. How about a round of applause for all the films, all of the amazing people that have been involved with this event. My name is Tobias Forrest. I go by Toby, just to save you that extra syllable. And our panel today is going to be called Are We There Yet? Authentic Representation in Film. And we've got a fantastic panel right here. I'd like to introduce first Elle Protruge. She's a talent manager with C Talent at Whaler who represents high-profile deaf and disabled actors, models, and content creators. Her clients can be seen in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and HBO's The Last of Us, as well as JCPenney, CVS Health, and more. And then we also have Ashley Eakin. Give a round of applause for Ashley. She's a writer-director whose latest film, Forgive Us Our Trespasses, has developed as part of Netflix's Emerging Filmmaker Initiative. Plus, she's developing a half-hour series with 20th Century for FX that is inspired by her award-winning short film, Single. All right, yes, continue. And we also have Natalie Trevon, an actress, writer, dancer, and fashion beauty accessibility consultant. She's the winner of 2021 and 2022's Disability Film Challenge Best Actor Award. She is also the marketing and outreach coordinator for Blind Institute of Technology, plus the creative director and co-host of the podcast Fashionably Tardy. Give it up for Natalie and the rest of our awesome panel here. So, film provides us with a window to experience what others experience. When film portrays the experience of people with disability, we ask, should those films be cast with actors who have disabilities, or can anyone play that role? This panel is going to explore authentic casting, where we are, and where we still need to go. All right, let's start off with what does authentic representation mean? I mean, I have my idea, but you're on a side of the business that's completely different. So what do you think, Al?
So for me, authentic representation is pretty much like a definition by the words that it is. It's authentically representing the group that you are putting out in the film or TV or commercial or what have you, because everyone deserves to see and or hear themselves accurately reflected back at them. Because when we see or hear or experience ourselves reflected back at us, we say, oh, I'm here, I exist, like I'm real. Like I'm sure everyone remembers the first time they read in a book about a character and you were like, oh my gosh, that's me, I relate to this person, or saw themselves on a TV show or a film or something. And we're like, oh my gosh, that's me, I'm here. That's what I really think that means.
Yeah. Natalie, as a performer, what does that sort of mean for you? Authentic portrayal, authentic representation.
Yeah, so something that I love that the disability advocate Christine Bruno says all the time is that having a disability is not a technical skill. And so when people that aren't disabled are playing us on television or film, you can't put on a disability. That's not something you put on. This is our day to day. We live this every day. And so why not have us play ourselves and show that authentic, genuine representation and not some stereotype or trope that some writer who has no experience with disability knows nothing about, and then it ends up being wrong. So it's just us showing up as us, how we are. And we're like amazing people. We have regular lives with real people problems, and we need to see that shown correctly.
Elle, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm
Oh, sorry.
completely aligned.
I meant Ashley. Sorry about that.
I think it's super important. I'm echoing everything that they both said, but I think it also takes incredible amount of risk and being comfortable with that risk and going into the unknown to discover and find and develop really interesting people. One of Elle's clients, Knox Gibson, in my short "Forgive Us Our Trespasses," I was following this kid for a really long time on Instagram and then developed this project. I was hoping he could act. He was definitely green. But we had to convince producers that we wanted someone with an actual disability who fit the role. And now, since that short came out, he had a sample of something that was really professionally done, a high budget, and then the people from the Hunger Games saw it and cast him in that. So it's giving people a platform to then be able to launch off in a bigger way. But it's a risk. I had to convince a bunch of people to let this kid do it, to put the money into it. And all of, everyone had to act at some point for the first time. Every single actor out there. So I think it's just people being comfortable and taking that risk and being bold.
Do you think that maybe it comes down to a financial excuse sometimes? I don't know. What do you think, Elle?
I can see why some people in the film and television and production see disability or accessibility as like a line item on a budget, but I don't think they understand that, the byproduct of having an accessible production or having an accessible studio or having an accessible X, Y, or Z just allows so much more creativity to be brought into the room and allows so much more content to be created and so many more ideas to be then made. So I think there's a pretty great ROI on accessibility and inclusion in TV and film, but I do think that it does take a lot of convincing to be like, hey, we're here, we've been here, maybe include us.
Yeah, one of my first experiences um, with this was seeing a movie called The Men. It was Marlon Brando's very first movie, and I understand that they needed an able-bodied guy that could portray someone in a wheelchair who had just been hurt in the war, and then they cast everybody else was authentically cast was guys that were straight from World War II who had spinal cord injuries, and that Stanley Kramer did that film, and that was in the 1940s. That was the excuse, right? We need an able-bodied actor with a name, although Marlon Brando didn't have that name yet quite, and then we'll fill it with authentic representation in the background. Um, I don't know, Natalie, what do you think? Is that still what's happening?
I think yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think it comes to what Ashley was just saying about taking risks. They're going to want to cast the A-list actor, the person that's already well known. But as she already said, how are we supposed to even get to that status without the opportunity to show what we can do? And there's a lot of amazing disabled actors out there, but they just don't have the space to show how immensely talented they are. So I do think that efforts are being made to try to bring more people in front of the screen, but it's still very slow.
Yeah. Um, so, Ashley, you're a writer director. So, does this, you think, only apply to actors? Or does it go beyond the spectrum of what's just on this side of the camera lens?
Yeah, I think it goes behind the screen as well. The thing with actors is a lot of these people will really want the job. And so they potentially might put themselves in a position to have a storyline that could be harmful or problematic. And you need people in power, producers, writers, directors, to be able to say, hey, we can't go this direction without fear of losing their job. Because some people just, want the role and they'll say, sure, great. And not complain or not speak up. That's not everyone, but I think you really have to have someone in a position of power who is disabled if your film is going to be about disability.
Yeah. What do you think, Al?
Yeah, I was just bouncing off that. Like, you need to have us in the room because I think the part of authentic representation is from day dot of the idea of including a disabled person within your ensemble cast, or just saying, hey, let's just float the idea of perhaps hiring a disabled actor. You just need someone in the room who can bring their authentic lived experience to that, as opposed to making the actor act as a consultant for something that should have been happening like weeks ago when the writing was happening.
Right. I mean, what you're saying is that it should start with the script. It
Yeah.
should start, the authentic representation shouldn't be the final result. It should be the initial response. And I think we've all experienced it, and I know a lot of the audience members out there, you've seen it. The tropes of disability. And a lot of times, I I don't know. Is that the fault of the writer that chose? I'm going to choose this disability and focus on the disability to move the story forward or to make the story more I don't know, empathetic or emotional or powerful, whatever it might be. I don't know. What do y'all think about that?
I mean, it's like not a plot device. It's my life. But I understand that that's not like a common uh, conception within the industry. There's many non-disabled people in the entertainment industry who are writing these stories and making these stories and in positions of power. Um, but I completely lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I mean,
So
Ashley, you're a writer, and writing authentic representations of probably any character is important to you.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, and I also think it's okay to collaborate with people who are non-disabled. We don't only have to work with each other, but I think it's about integrating ourselves within the community of Hollywood. And yeah, I mean, I think that's that coming back to that whole thing of being in a position of power. I'm working on projects that are about disability. The writers are not disabled, but I am, and I can tell them, "Hey, we're not going this direction." So I think it's just something, it's the way you work with people, and you have to work with producers and companies that are willing to let you take the lead and allow you to, give your direction.
Yeah, I think you hit something pretty important, which was um, just the fact that with it starting as from a writing perspective, and we don't always see in. We always see out, right? So we see the disability from our perspective, but the the fact is we also need the perspective of the world around us back at what they see. What is your vision of disability? Are you still following this narrative that's been force fed since the 40s and beyond? And it brings me to the next question, which is, why is authentic casting important? Um, Natalie, I know you want the job, so authentic casting is really important, right? I mean, it doesn't only give us the experience and the paycheck, but it also allows us a chance to prove ourselves, which I know you've had a few great opportunities at. Can you tell us about some of that?
Yeah, I think it's important because here's the thing. I think, every time I get casted for something, people want to put some dark sunglasses on me because that's the stereotype, right? Blind people have a dog and they wear dark sunglasses. And I started asking questions. I was like, hey, is it Versace sunglasses? Does I'm getting Celine? Are they Gucci? Like, do I get to be, is it a fashion statement? Like, why am I wearing glasses? And they're like, oh, I mean, okay, no glasses then. Take out the glasses. She doesn't want that. And I think if it wasn't an actual blind person on the set to actually give that feedback, then they would still be doing that trope, right? So I think that's why authentic casting is so important, because we're actually on set to say, hey, actually, I wouldn't do this, or actually, I don't need this, or actually, blindness is a spectrum and we don't all look the same. And so I think that's why it's important, because we can then be that voice if there's not a writer, right? I mean, I'm not saying there shouldn't be, because there absolutely should be, but if there's not, then we have that opportunity to speak up for ourselves.
Right, right. Do either of you had anything to add to that?
I mean, I think it's, yeah, you bring that nuance to disability. It's really easy to step into a muddy place with disability, and all of a sudden you're the inspiration that everyone is happy they're not you. And that's, it can easily go that direction with the smallest things. And I think people with disabilities are very aware of all these nuances.
Yeah, I think that brings us to what happens when they're not cast authentically. And we've probably all experienced the dangers of when things are not cast authentically, because it creates a narrative that's most likely untrue. You obviously want your clients to be cast
Yeah.
and get jobs, and authenticity is part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it just is this on? Great.
You're
Just
back.
perpetuates negative stereotypes like 99% of the time, and it also just is just a blatant show of disrespect to the entire disabled creative, community that's out there, because there's so many, incredible disabled performers who could have played that role, been that character, and they're like, oh no, let's just sit this guy down in a wheelchair and call it a day. I just dealt with this recently. I had a client who was auditioning for a role where she had an upper limb difference. My client has an upper limb difference. Stunning. And
What a perfect fit.
perfect fit, because actors with limb differences actually getting to audition for roles that are written for actors, people with limb differences, are like far and few between. She got really far. She got into chemistry reads, and she told me, hey, the other girl that's reading for this role is non-disabled. And I was like, strange. And she ended up not getting the role. My client didn't get it. And I asked casting, I was like, hey, curious. I know that the other girl who was reading for this wasn't disabled. Have they decided to go in a different direction with the character because it was written for a disabled person? And they were like, yeah, we thought the other person matched in terms of like chemistry and personality, etc., which is incredibly important when you're putting together an ensemble cast. And they said, oh, well, they're sort of not sure if they're going to go in the direction of disability, but in case they do keep it, would your client be interested in consulting for the role for the actress? And I had to step away from my computer for like a solid 3 days, because the first email I wrote was like not professional.
Thanks for the consolation prize.
Yeah, I was like, I think that would be extremely offensive to say, hey, like, we sure would love to get it right, when getting it right in the first place would have been not even auditioning this other actress. And luckily they took it very well once I removed like half of my scathing commentary. But I made it like just very clear. I was like, listen, like, this just like the fact that you could like take or leave her identity as a disabled person just makes it super clear that like this wasn't an important part of the character in the first place. And it was in the breakdown, it seemed to like inform some of her personality, but I was like, listen, you can't just, it's not a hat you put on and take off at the end of the day. This is a real lived experience and a real identity. So I understand that it's a take or leave, not that important, but my job and my company is to avoid things like this exactly happening. So I need to tell you about it.
Right. Ashley, as a director, how important is it to you, I guess? I mean, if you have a character who is multiple descriptors, right? Then what becomes the most important descriptor? I mean, if you can't meet all the needs, if you have a character that you say is, let's say they're gay and they're blind and they're in a wheelchair and they're a person of color, and then what becomes the value?
Yeah, I think when you are in a position to be creating something, and one of the projects I'm developing is going to be like 5 roles, all disabled people, and you're like, okay, we might have to change these characters that we wrote to fit the people that we find who can act in these roles. Because acting is hard. It's a very hard skill. It's not something everyone can do. I'm terrible at it. There's a lot of people who they're not meant to be actors. And I think, we have to be real with that. And, it's about adjusting what you need to make it fit those people who can act. And I think, on the point that to be committed to casting authentically, if you're not, you will easily do what happened in Elle's situation. You'll fill it with someone else. You won't put resources towards digging and actually trying to find people. And, I used to work for John Chu, who directed Crazy Rich Asians. I was part of the whole process of that. And we found our actors by going global and months and months and months of digging. And they ended up finding Henry Golding, who was, a travel host at the time, not really pursuing acting very much. And they took a risk on him and it worked out. But it was not, if they were just like, at one point they wanted to whitewash that project. And if that would have moved forward, you would have never done the digging that they needed to do to find that actor. So you have to stay committed to it, even if that means pushing your movie 2 years. We haven't found them yet. But I think a lot of discovery is really important. Like I find a lot of people on Instagram who don't even want to be actors because a lot of people with disabilities don't think that they could act because they're not seeing it everywhere. They're like, oh, I used to exclude myself from doing extra work when I was coming up as an assistant because I was like, it wouldn't make sense if people saw me there. But like I automatically did that because we never see people with disabilities in movies at the time authentically. And so, yeah, you have to find these people and dig and be like, hey, have you ever thought about acting? I'm that person who slides into your DMs. So, yeah.
And I think part of the unfortunate thing is that if it's not written on the paper that character is disabled or is diverse, it doesn't get looked at that way or it doesn't get considered that way. And I think what you said is important, that you adapt to the person that can help best tell this story. Natalie, I know we've probably both experienced, there's an actor who is playing the disability and maybe it doesn't seem like they did their homework or maybe whatever. Whenever I see someone in a wheelchair, like the legs are always off to one side. The actor's always, they're never on a cushion. And I'm like, their poor rear end sitting there all day and faking disabled. But what do you think, Natalie, if an actor decides to take a role of a character who's disabled, do you fault them?
And I don't know that I fault the actor per se, just because I know what it is, what it's like to be an actor, and you're just so happy to be working and to get the opportunity. But I do think the responsibility is on the production casting to do the work and stop. A lot of times they're like, well, we tried our best. And it's like, actually, you didn't. You auditioned about 3 people and decided, oh, well, no. And so I think that I think they do have some accountability, but I see both sides, but it is harmful, just like you said, Toby, because you're like, okay, well, that's totally wrong. And one thing that blind people just absolutely get so tired of is people coming up to us and being like, oh, nice to meet you. Like, do you want to film my face? And we're like, no,
Wow.
we don't really do that. And they're like, oh, well, I saw it on such and such. And I'm like, yeah, nobody does that. Like, what are we supposed to be filling for? Acne, pimples? Like, what are we like? We can't tell what you look like by touching your face. And that's nasty. You shouldn't want a total stranger touching on your face. So I think it's just like, they just need to do better as far as like really getting the right people in the writers' rooms and really understanding that, you know, authentic and genuine representation is super important because it is harmful in the long run. And then we have to deal with it in regular society.
Great. I cannot feel my face when I'm with you, I guess. um, Now, there's tons of movies that haven't been authentically cast, and a lot of them have gotten Oscars, right? It's like there's a lot of really great roles that have been not authentically cast, but they're such a huge part of our society and of our sort of infrastructure socially. Um, do those films still have value? Do those characters still have value? The Lieutenant Dan and I mean, even Darth Vader is a quadruple amputee, just trying to get his son into the family business. It's what do you think,
I don't think.
Al?
I don't think it's my prerogative necessarily to say whether or not art has value. Like I don't think that it's fair to say, oh well, this film didn't have an authentically cast character. It's garbage. Like there's still talent there. Obviously they're not a terrible actor. They got the role. They did very well. They got nominated for things. I mean, I'm sure everyone knows the stats of like, you play X, you play Y, you'll get nominated. You know, and I I don't think it's fair to assign value in that way, but I do think that in hopefully, let's say like 5-10 years time, we'll like look back at those films and be like, what were we doing, and then see them as like possibly like cheap or like a worse version of what could have been, because hopefully the
Yeah,
commercialized people will understand the commercial value of disabled actors and disabled performers, people above and below the line, in front of, behind the camera, being involved in productions, and see that it's totally a great option and you can still make money.
right, right. Ashley, you're a writer. I mean, a director. Do you think that a film like Coda that's authentically cast is has more value or more impact than something like My Left Foot?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in the same space as Elle. Like, you can't say what has more impact or doesn't. I think it depends who you're asking. And if you ask the disability community, we're going to say, oh, we didn't see ourselves represented. It felt, false. But, I think of the film Wonder, and my nephews saw it when they were like 6, or I think they were like 8 and 7 or 9. I don't know. But we had this amazing conversation about me being different. And we've never been able to have that conversation. So that movie opened up the door to talk about disabilities. And it was this really amazing exchange, but it's not authentically cast, which we wish it was. So I think it's that whole word of nuance, which I think it's specific towards each project, and it doesn't completely erase the value, but I think it will make it better, and it makes the disabled community feel seen and heard, and those tropes are avoided, and usually the movie is better if there's actual disabled people cast in it.
Yeah, it seems like the value lies in the conversations that can be made from the artistic material, right? That's created, and education can come from that. Um, Natalie, you have any thoughts on the value of films that maybe aren't authentically cast, but at least they shed light and maybe inspire us to stories that will be eventually cast?
Yeah, I think I agree with what they both said. Like, I don't want to say like, I mean, black people go up for the movie Ray, right? So it's like there's no arguing like that Jamie Foxx is a great actor, right? But it's just like I think it's hard for people to see it from our point of view that like, okay, yeah, it's great, but it would have been greater if we would have saw ourselves. So I think it's kind of like that double-edged sword again. Like, I don't want to say it wasn't a good movie, but also, little blind boys and girls or whoever needs to be able to see themselves. Because I'll say this, like when I was teaching blind students, like there was a lot of things that they wanted to be, and acting was one. And they would say, oh, but I don't think I can do that because I don't know any blind actors. And that used to break my heart. Or I don't know any blind music producers or whatever it may be, because they weren't seeing those people. And so that's what makes it so heartbreaking at the end of the day. Like, people don't know that they can actually grow up and do these jobs.
Right, because you it's not there. It's not built into the media and into the social structure. It is, unfortunately, if you don't see it, you don't believe it, right? And
I
that,
felt I felt the very same about writing and directing. I mean, I didn't even think this was a path for me until I was in a classroom. I was a journalism major, and a person came in with a paralyzed arm, and they were a distributor. And I was like, "Oh, people like that can work in Hollywood. Maybe there's a shot for me." And it completely changed my life. Like that one moment of seeing it represented in some sense of just having a different body, it changed everything.
yeah. Uh, Al, you think the industry is moving? Have you seen more action, more action among the sharks, I guess?
Yeah, I do think that the industry is moving, if not glacially, to better disability representation and also just asking the right questions. I think is very important because unfortunately, many people who are in charge of making these shows, making these films, writing these scripts are, for lack of a better word, ignorant to the disabled experience and don't know what they just don't know what questions to ask, so the questions never get asked because they don't want to seem like they don't know anything.
Yeah.
But I have noticed in my over 5 years now of looking at Breakdown Express, looking at casting networks, looking at all those different breakdowns that come out, you know, the language has shifted for, I guess, specifically for, systemically disenfranchised communities, not just the disability community, intersectionality wise, you know, the people of different genders, people of different ethnicities, people of different sexual identities, and the disabled community sort of at the back, but coming up the tail end. There's been a good amount of change just in the last few years that I have noticed. And language is changing, language is different, but also people are much more receptive to hearing feedback. Because every time I see a breakdown that says something like wheelchair bound or something hideous, I shoot them an email and I'm like, hey, friend, just an FYI, let's use different language. And you say it kindly because you don't want to be like, hey, idiot. Because unfortunately, that's like not okay to do.
That's not good language.
Pardon?
Probably not good language.
Probably just not like professional language. But people are listening and people are much more grateful to be brought into the experience of being educated these days rather
Right.
than feeling like, ugh, oh my God, like you're so PC, you're trying to be whatever. They're like, oh, thank you, I didn't know that. And that's something that I've luckily been on more on the receiving end of rather than like, okay, great, thanks. I'll remember that for next time. And then, they
Right.
don't.
Natalie, do you find it's become a more sensitive place as well as, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, there is change slowly being made. I remember that I was shooting a Spectrum commercial and the people were like, oh, make sure her cane is in the shot. And the director was like, no, she's at home. Like, why does she need her cane in the shot? He was like, where would you keep your cane? I'm like, by the door. He's like, take it out. And so I think that people are starting to be more like understanding and like we now have a voice on set. Like we can say the things that we like and don't like or what we wouldn't or won't do. And something that I also notice is that like we're starting to also get auditions that aren't specific to disability, which I think is great. I have been playing an art teacher for like a whole year now for some California Connect commercials. So I thought that was great. Like it's not focusing on the disability so much as just me being a blind person who happens to be an art teacher, right? So I think there are changes that are being made, and I'm just hoping that it keeps moving in that same direction and we're able to start to really dig deep and play some complex characters that don't always have to just talk about our disability.
Right. I think that's totally important. Is that the disability is a circumstance, often of the character. It's not what it defines my parking, but it doesn't define me, I guess, is how I should put it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, like, and you see places like CBS, Paramount doing these great CBS diversity workshops. You've got like the awesome database they're doing because they're like, hey, we've told a lot of the casting directors that we work with to like be more open minded, and when the studio is telling you that, they do listen, which is nice. But I submit my clients. You're looking for a white woman in her 30s with brown hair who's a lawyer. I've got that. She has one arm, but like she could also be a lawyer. Like, submit her for that kind of stuff because hey, she's a person. You know,
Right. Yeah.
she could very easily be a lawyer. And casting's much more receptive to things like that. They're much more open minded, and I think with like some big ticket items in terms of being connected with studios as opposed to not just like disability grassroots foundations coming out and being like, let's promote disabled actors when the people in power, the big names, CBS, Netflix, what have you, have disability initiatives and are pointing out to say, hey, this is a problem, and we're actively trying to counter it and do better, then people are like, oh, let's pay attention now. So, I mean,
Right.
things are making their way along.
Ashley, what do you think? Are you constantly having to educate people behind the, on the other side of the fence?
Yes and no. I mean, it's been a really interesting 5 years, as I feel I was saying as well. And in the past probably 2 to 3 years since I've had reps and have been going around and doing the general meetings, and everyone wants a disability story. Like, I feel like everyone is like, what else do you have about disability? And I'm like, I'm developing now all the stuff I have. So I think changed a lot. And I think CODA really helped us. And I think, yeah, I mean, I've come across some projects that I'm working on now that I did not create it. And it was really cool to be a part of it and read something and go, oh, they did their proper research and they're going, I've never directed a feature and they're going with a new feature director because, they want to be authentic to the community. So you get those opportunities when they're committed to that. So it's changing for the better, and I'm excited, and I've been able to pass off some opportunities to friends that are other writers, or because I'm like, I want us all to grow. I think we need so many stories so not one person is like, that doesn't represent us, because we're not a monolith. It's all our stories are very different, and so many things define disability. So I want everyone to rise.
Right. Right. Um, it's like that iceberg analogy, right? You're only seeing that top little bit, and there's so much more to this community and so much more to these stories that are being told. Um, uh, Natalie, I don't, what's it, what do you think is the next step? I mean, I have in my sort of mind is that okay, at least we're having some light focused on the idea that people with disabilities can and should maybe play people with disabilities. But what about the other direction? People with disabilities playing people without disabilities. Have you had that opportunity at all, Natalie? Or
No, not quite. I mean, every time we do the Disability Film Challenge, I always play a character that we really don't focus on the blindness. So, like last year, I was a hip hop icon, and it was kind of like us kind of poking fun at Cardi B and Nicki Minaj, and
you
we had
were
a lot of fun
awesome.
with it. And then this year, I did a spinoff of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And so we really didn't focus on the disability. I was just being a hip hop icon, and I like wrote my own raps, and like we actually got in the studio and had a bunch of fun with it, and just really got to play this like complex funny character. And then of course Seven, the Buffy spinoff, was a little bit more serious, and it was more about action and fighting. And so I think on my part, yes, I'm trying to showcase that I can play other parts, but I think as far as the industry goes, it's still a little slow. Like I haven't seen a lot of like them wanting to bring us in for like these really complex characters. No.
Yeah, well, I guess that's why we need to write them and create them, and which is something that obviously all of you guys are doing. Um, Ashley, as a content creator, as someone who writes and directs and does all that, what do you think needs to happen in order to push this authentic representation agenda? I mean, it's to show the value of casting people who look or can fulfill whatever is written on that page.
Yeah, I mean, I think developing more talent and opening that door for people to let us cast someone that has never acted before, or I think that's huge. Being bold, taking risks, green lighting projects. Development is great, but they call it development hell for a reason, because nothing, even though you're developing, nothing's really getting done and can't be put out into the world until they green light it and actually give you the money to make it. So I think that's what needs to happen.
Yeah. Oh, you're on the business end of it. You get to see and you have to try and sell, I'm sure, your clients sometimes and go, hey, there's value. This person's going to bring their own wheelchair. You don't have to rent one. You have to try and do that, but then you also have to fight it too, because they assume disability is going to cost more. Oh, then I got to make it accessible. Or, oh, what if they get hurt on set and things like that? Where are we at with that?
Just responding to that last point, I luckily haven't had to come across a situation in which they said, "Oh, gee, we'd really like to cast your client, but it would be expensive to do this." I'm very lucky to have not had to experience that as a representative. But when one of my clients got cast on a show, the offer came in Wednesday. They wanted to fly him and his mother to Canada for a month Friday, and he is a young deaf actor. And I was like, okay, great. Like, just want to ensure that, like, you have this, like, you have an interpreter, you have a director of ASL. And they were like, wide eyed, deer in headlights, like, huh? And I was like, okay, well, we can't have his contract signed and him flying to Canada for a month in 2 days without this, like, being coordinated. And, like, I don't know why in your, like, months long search for an actor to fit this role, like, no one thought of this. It's bananas. Luckily, everything worked out. It was great. But I just think people, like I said before, just don't know, because they've never been given. I don't want to say never. They are not often given the opportunity to learn about the needs of the disabled community, other than what they see on TV or what their friends tell them, or just if they come to something like this, which would be great. But I think that overall, we're trying to educate people in the best way that we can. And while I am a firm believer that it's not the it's not the responsibility of the oppressed to educate the oppressor, I also, on the flip side, do think that it is important for people who within the community, us being educated folks within the community about disability, about access, integrate, inclusion, equity, all that stuff, to be the ones educating people on those topics. And also, you can't just ask like one disabled person and be like, well, my friend Jeff in a wheelchair said this. And you're like,
Right.
okay, well, I have like a consulting team.
He's the guy on the sign, though. So,
Yeah.
he knows it all. Natalie, it's like you end up representing an entire community, right? When you get a job, it's like there's a weight. There's a weight on you that you're representing this community of people with disabilities. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a huge opportunity to work with Viola Davis, and I hadn't met her yet, and she was coming to the set, and it was early morning, and I'm there with the PAs, and Viola comes up to the door, and she says hi to everybody, and opens the door, and she goes into the studio, and the PA is immediately like, oh my God, should I have opened the door for Viola Davis? And the other PA was like, I don't know, because she's a pretty independent woman, and maybe she wants to open the door for herself. And I'm sitting there going, this is exactly what people do when I'm going towards a door in my wheelchair. And like, me and Viola Davis are the same person. And they just don't know what to do because they're not educated, right, by the media that they've been fed, and therefore the fear is that they're going to do something wrong. Natalie, what's that like when you have to deal with other people's fear, or maybe your own fear of having to represent an entire community and not mess it up for the people trying to get in the door behind you?
Yeah, I think a lot of times I tend to be the only blind black woman in a lot of
Get out of
spaces. And
here.
so sometimes I do feel the pressure, um, because from an early age, before I was even blind, as a person of color, we're taught you have to do 150% when everybody's just doing 50, right? Like we're taught to be the best and you have to work hard and you have to prove yourself. And so I think that kind of mounts when you have a disability too, because like even if you do something like mediocre, people clap and be like, "Oh, that was cute. She's blind. Like at least she tried," you know. And that's not the reaction that I want, right? I want it to be genuinely, "Hey, she killed it," you know. And so like I think like that can be very difficult. But I think on the flip side, also you do have to deal with other people's fears because I had booked an Indeed commercial and everyone was just like tiptoeing, like trying to help me do every little thing. And I was like, hey, if you give directions, I'll follow them. Like, I'll be good. Like, and I was able to walk across the campus and everything and not fall. And I'm like, nobody fell, nobody got hurt. We're good. You're good. I'm good. Like, just trying to make people feel comfortable. But I think people kind of just need to see what you can do before they relax. And so I think that's just what it comes down to. But then again, we need the opportunity to show them what we can do. So it's like this big circle sometimes.
Right. It's a bit of obviously preaching to the choir here. We appreciate everybody sticking around and also the support for Real Abilities and from Real Abilities. Big round of applause for Real Abilities, everybody, since we're here. Um, Natalie, do you have anything else you want to share with our final kind of notes? And also, where can people see your content and sort of support what you're doing?
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you to Real Abilities. I'm so honored and excited to be here. And I'm so glad that you guys all joined us for this panel. And I can be found on all social media platforms at Natalie Trevon. So Natalie, and then Trevon, Trevonne. And I have a lot of my content on my social media. So yeah.
All right. Well, you got to follow her, and she is amazing and hilarious. And there's a reason she's won this award 2 years in a row, and she's probably going to go for the third, and then a whole decade. No one's going to take your throne from you. Um, but thank you so much, Natalie, for being here and sharing your voice and your experiences with us. Um, Ashley, you have any final things to say? I mean, are we there yet with the authentic representation?
I think there's been a lot of amazing stuff, but I don't think we should ever be there. We need to keep telling stories about disabilities because there's so many and every person's situation is different. Their circumstances are different. So I think we have to keep pushing it out there.
Awesome. And what do you got coming up? I mean, we knew it. We heard a little bit, but why don't you tell us
Yeah, I
a
have
tiny bit more?
I just directed some episodes of TV last year which are out now. There's Disney Plus. There is this series created by Brie Larson called Growing Up. And there's a whole episode featured to disability, which is amazing and very powerful. And then I also worked on a show for Apple called Best Foot Forward, and I directed 2 episodes. And the lead has a prosthetic leg, and they found him in some town. I think it's like New Jersey, somewhere, just playing baseball. He was not wanting to be an actor. It's one of those, and he led an entire show on Apple, and he was the best kid actor there amongst like Disney, Disney Star kids and
Awesome.
Nickelodeon kids and all this stuff. So that I directed 2 episodes of that, and then yeah, my project Forgive Us Our Trespasses is on Netflix. So yeah, and I'm just pushing, developing TV and features, and some stuff is about disability, very much about disability, and some of it, the character will just happen to have a disability. So, trying to
good.
do both kind of arenas.
Yeah, well, because of that, I mean, you are educating the public, which hopefully takes a little bit of that fear away from the communication end, which is really the answer. I mean, that's all it comes down to is asking, and then also asking people to be a part of it, which is really where you're at, Elle, and you have to probably sort of search the barrel to try and find the perfect fit for this thing, and it's not always easy to find, even though we've got a great community. Um, where do you think we have to go and from here? Are we there yet?
I mean, very similarly to Ashley, I don't think we will ever be at a point where we say like we're there yet, or like we get there. I think we're continually wanting to tell more stories about the intersectionality between people's disabled identity and the many other identities that inform them as people. There's so many different little bits and bobs that make up a human being, and there's so many different ways for those stories to be told. People have been telling stories for eons, and we haven't run out yet. Despite the amount of sequels and remakes that are out there, we haven't run out of original stories. And I think that there's so many more out there, and as
Yeah.
long as disabled people continue to get lifted up the ladder, like Ashley mentioned earlier, that she's now in a position where she can bring up other people, hire disabled writers, hire her disabled friends, and say like, hey, you come too. That's so incredibly important. And we've seen it similarly, like an example is like Gloria Calderon Kellett, who did One Day at a Time. Finally being in a place of power, she was able to uplift, the Latin community and bring on her friends as writers, bring on her friends as directors, and uplift others in that way. So I think there just needs to be like a bevy of opportunities out there. People just need to stop being afraid of talking about disability.
I think she basically just challenged all of you guys to go out and create content and go write stories about people with disabilities, or write stories and just there happens to have some disability involved as flavor, who knows, as whatever. But once we can see on our TV and on the screen what we see on our streets, right? Is that's the goal? Is that we can find an equal representation on film that we can also see in life. And I might watch a movie about Hawaii and I never see anybody with a disability. But if I go to Hawaii, guess what? I'm probably going to see a bunch of people who happen to have disabilities. And I think whether it's the very top actor in the project or even the PA that gets hired who happens to have a limb difference or whatever it might be. Hopefully, this entertainment industry is finding value in authentic representation, both on screen and behind the camera, and in other parts of the industry. So, thanks to our amazing panel. Give them a round of applause, everybody. Making big changes in the industry so that panels like this hopefully don't have to happen someday.
I'd
Right?
love to stop talking about this.
Let's just stop talking about this, everybody. And we'll let you go back to this amazing film festival, Real Abilities. Come out tomorrow. There's going to be more to be had, more to be heard, more to be seen. And once again, thank you all to our wonderful panel. Thank you all to our wonderful audience and to this amazing city, Los Angeles. All right, Real Abilities, have a wonderful night.